Hi, I'm Sean Greathouse, co-founder of Hamskea Archery Solutions. Many of you guys are familiar with our Easy Third Axis level that we brought to market several years ago to level your first, second, and third axis at full draw. Well, we've added to that line with our new GEN2PRO Third Axis level. It's got several new cool features, and today I'm going to go through tournament sights and slider sights on how to level first, second, and third axis. By properly setting your first, second, and third axis settings on your sight, you're able to take out any mechanical errors in your equipment that would lead to left and right misses at shot distance or extreme angle change. Everything I'm going through today, you'll be able to find in our inside instructions in the backer card. The first step to leveling the axes of your sight is to level your bow. So we're going to simply do that by attaching the GEN2PRO onto the string. There's a string groove feature that I've attached here to the string, and there's a turret level in the top of the GEN2PRO. And now I'm going to simply adjust that turret level until it's centered up. And what that's doing is that's leveling the bow string perfectly plumb. And this is going to give us our foundation to level all of the axes on our sight. With the bowstring perfectly vertical, our peep is now oriented directly in line with the path of our arrow. Okay, now we're going to level the first axis on our sight. And to do that, we're going to move the GEN2PRO level, and we're going to attach it to the slider portion or the vertical portion of our tournament sight by adjusting the jaws open. We've got 1.3 inches of width, so it'll accommodate 99% of the sights out there. And the other cool feature is if you have one of the angled sights, you can use the string groove, and that will clamp on the sight and hold it firmly in place. One other thing you want to note is that you don't have a sight tape or something that it's going to be, when you clamp it on, it'll be half on or half off the sight tape, because that will give you a false reading. So you want to make sure that you're clamping it onto a sight in a square location that is not partially on a sight tape and partially off. Now that I've attached the GEN2PRO on the sight rail, you can see that the bubble vial is not perpendicular. I need to adjust my first axis setting on this particular sight and make my bubble vial perpendicular with my bowstring. So it's important to note that if your first axis isn't parallel with your bowstring, your pins are going to be off, or your scope is going to be sliding at an angle. So what that means is at 20 yards, you might be right on, and as you go out to further distance, you'll slowly be going, having impacts either to the left or to the right. Okay, let's talk about leveling the second axis now. The second axis is adjusting your scope to where it's perpendicular to the first axis. If your scope is not square or perpendicular to the first axis, which we just leveled, this will cause you to cant your bow, and that will contribute to left or right misses on flat ground. So to adjust the second axis on this particular sight, we're going to loosen the screws that holds the housing, and now we're going to pivot the scope. And what we're looking for is we're trying to get the bubble in the GEN2PRO vial and the bubble in the scope to correlate. Once we get those two bubbles aligned where they correlate and are reading the same, we then have set our second axis. And the most important thing is that the second axis is now square to the first axis. That will ensure that it travels perfectly straight up and down the first axis, and you're not canting your bow left or right. Now let's talk about third axis. Many of you have heard you have to set your third axis at full draw, and that is true. Bench-mounted third axis device levelers do not work, and here's why. When you draw your bow back, the load transfers from the string over to the cables, causing the bow to pivot in your hand. Some call it torque, I call it static to full draw shift. That static to full draw shift changes with every bow on the market depending on the bow's poundage, the let off on the bow, the axle to axle length, and the shooter's induced bow grip or bow torque. With those variables, you have to set your third axis at full draw. To achieve leveling your third axis at full draw, we've developed a patented feature with our alignment rod. We're going to use this alignment rod and an external vertical reference to properly adjust your third axis setting. With your GEN2PRO still attached to the sight rail, we're going to install the alignment rod into one of the two vertical reference holes. We're going to lock it in place with the nylon lock nut. With our alignment rod installed, next we're going to need a vertical external reference, such as a plumb bob line, or you can take a carpenter's level and draw a line on a wall with a Sharpie. Any external vertical reference will work. But it's important to note that for this next step in adjusting third axis that you reference only alignment rod aimed on the vertical line and you ignore the bubble vial for this next step. One other important thing to note prior to adjusting your third axis would be that you would want to set your bow up and have it configured as close as possible to how you're going to use it in the field, meaning you're going to want your quiver, your stabilizers, your poundage all dialed in pretty close, because if not, that's going to change how the bow pivots in your hand when coming to full draw. For this next adjustment, I'm going to be drawing my bow back without an arrow. Now, this is a warning. Please take the necessary precautions to do whatever you need to do to ensure you don't dry fire your bow. Now draw your bow back and aim the two tips of the alignment rod on the plumb bob. This will keep your bow sitting vertically even if you aim at extreme angles. As you aim down at an angle, reference the sight bubble vial while keeping the tips of the alignment rod aimed on the plumb bob line. Here you can see the sight bubble is reading incorrectly even though the bow is still vertical. To adjust the third axis setting, I'm going to loosen the third axis adjustment. On this side it's here, and I'm going to adjust the scope back in towards the riser of the bow or the shooter. I'm going to lock it down in place, and now I'm going to go back out and repeat the process. Once I get the bubble vial in the scope in the middle, when I'm aiming the alignment rod on the vertical line at an extreme downhill angle, my third axis setting is then set. Once that's achieved, your first, second, and third axis are all properly set. We hope this video helped clear up any confusion that any of you had concerning setting your first, second, and third axis, and hopefully gave you maybe a couple of aha moments on how third axis works, etc. We have a couple other new third axis leveling videos, one that shows you how to level your pin sight, and the other that shows you why you really want to care. Why is third axis important with real-world examples, etc. You can check those out on our website at hamskeaarchery.com or on our YouTube channel. Until next time, thanks for watching.